It was ordinary Thursday morning when I came to my bakery as always, when I saw the closed for maintenance sign taped crookedly on the front window. That was my first clue something was off. We never closed for maintenance. The second clue? My key didn't work. I tried once, twice, gave it a little jiggle like I always did. And then I saw it, this shiny new lock, brass and smug. Joel had changed the locks on me. I stepped back onto the sidewalk and took a breath, the kind you take when your whole chest is burning, but you don't want to fall apart in front of the UPS guy who just waved hello across the street. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the lock jammed. Maybe he forgot to tell me something. Then I saw her. Tasha, tall, tan, 26, and freshly graduated from some social media branding school. She'd been working part-time at the counter for the last 6 months, but apparently now she was the new co-owner. Or so her Instagram story from inside my bakery announced that morning. Big changes at Sweet June. So excited to start this new chapter with my amazing partner, both business and life. My amazing partner. My bakery, I built that place. I paid for every tile, every oven mitt, every vintage cake stand. And Joel? He had just slammed the door on all of it. On me. What he didn't know, what neither of them knew, is that while he was off playing sugar daddy with a pastry diploma Barbie, I was keeping receipts, legal ones. And while I may not have had the key to the new lock, I still held the deed. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at my own bakery like a customer locked out of her favorite place, watching strangers walk past as if the world hadn't just shifted under my feet. Inside, I could see movement. Joel in his flour-dusted polo, moving boxes behind the counter. And Tasha laughing. She laughed like she'd already won, like she'd claimed the prize and was busy unwrapping it. I watched her place one of my vanilla bean pound cakes on the display tray. That cake had taken me 3 months to perfect. That recipe was mine. The batter. The notes in my old spiral notebook. The handwritten card from my grandma that sat in the top drawer of the office. I stood there, shaking, trying to decide whether to knock or walk away. And then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Joel. Hey, didn't want to make this weird, but I think it's best we move in different directions. Tasha and I have some exciting new ideas for the shop. I'll have a lawyer send over some paperwork. You'll be taken care of. Taken care of? Like I was a problem he could cut a check for and walk away from. I stared at that message for a long time before replying. Sure, I'll wait to hear from your lawyer. Not because I believed anything he was saying, but because I already had one of my own. You see, Joel had forgotten something critical in his little rush to erase me. When we opened the bakery, he didn't want to take out a business loan. He said it made him nervous. So I used the inheritance my aunt left me. Every penny. I bought the building outright, set up the LLC in both our names, and structured the property deed in mine only just for tax purposes, my accountant had explained. I hadn't really thought much of it at the time. I wasn't trying to be sneaky. But now? It was the smartest move I'd ever made. Joel ran the counter. He smiled for customers, handled the books, called himself co-founder to anyone who'd listen, but he never touched the actual ownership papers. I kept those in a fireproof box under our bed, along with the deed, the original property contract, and our prenuptial agreement. The one he insisted we didn't need. The one I had drafted anyway, because I'd been married once before and I knew better. I never expected to use any of it. But now? I would use every line, every clause, every notarized signature. Not to destroy him, no. To reclaim what was already mine. I turned away from the bakery window and walked calmly to my car, the crawler box still in my hand. I wasn't going to fight him today. Let him bask in his victory. Let him decorate my shop with fake ivy and pastel hashtags. I had a different plan. I didn't drive straight to the lawyer's office. I went home first. Not the little craftsman house Joel and I had shared just a few blocks from the bakery. No, I hadn't lived there for nearly a year. He thought I was just craving space, that I needed time to reset. What he didn't realize was that I'd already moved on. Quietly, strategically. After months of Joel shutting me down, every time I brought up new ideas for the bakery extended hours, online ordering, gluten-free Saturdays, I'd stopped asking. I started planning instead. I rented a small loft apartment on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a clean space with big windows and room to think. A place that was mine. And that morning, after the locks changed and the crullers turned cold, I walked into that loft, slipped off my shoes, and made myself another cup of coffee, one that didn't taste like betrayal. Then I sat down and opened the black folder I kept in the desk drawer. Inside, the building deed, the original contract from the sale, the LLC operating agreement, my solo property insurance, and yes, the prenuptial agreement Joel had called paranoid. I'd highlighted the part that spelled out exactly what would happen if either of us tried to claim ownership of the other's premarital or separately titled assets. It was crystal clear. The bakery building was mine. Now he could take the ovens and mixers, the signage, the Instagram account he loved more than actual customers. But the roof, the walls, the bricks and beams, that belonged to me. I called Helen, my lawyer, around 11:30. "Tell me everything," she said without preamble. "He changed the locks," I said. A pause. Then, "Well, isn't that adorable? I assume you have the paperwork handy?" I smiled. "It's sitting right in front of me." Good. Because he just invited himself into a world of legal pain, and I would love nothing more than to introduce him to the welcome mat. By 2 p.m., we had the first set of papers drawn. A cease and desist for operating a business in my building without permission, an official notification of lease termination, and a formal request for financial disclosures. Joel was about to get an education in two things he never respected: business law and consequences. I wasn't going to storm into the bakery and make a scene. I wasn't going to post cryptic messages online. I wasn't even going to tell our regulars yet. No, I'd learned over the years that nothing unsettles a man like Joel more than silence. Because silence meant you weren't begging. You were building something. By Friday morning, the letter was ready. Helen had it couriered directly to Sweet June Bakery, signed, sealed, and delivered with all the pleasant professionalism of a velvet-wrapped hammer. I didn't go in. I didn't need to, but I heard from Tammy the florist next door around 12:07 p.m. Girl. He turned purple. I think he actually growled. Like, made a noise. And then Tasha started yelling something about Instagram partnerships. "You want me to send you the footage from my security camera?" I declined, but just barely. Tammy and I had always been cordial, never close. But one thing I've learned over the years, when a man tries to erase a woman, the other women quietly take notes. And sometimes, they hand them over when the moment's right. The letter was simple, elegant, and ironclad. As sole title holder of the property located at 118 East Maple Street, I am hereby notifying you that your presence within the building is unauthorized and constitutes unlawful use of private commercial real estate. Effective immediately, you are to vacate the premises and cease all business operations until a formal lease agreement is negotiated and executed under new terms, or until alternate arrangements are made. Failure to comply within five business days will result in legal escalation, including but not limited to eviction proceedings and damages. In other words, get out of my building, Joel, or start paying me rent at market rate. At 2:32 p.m. he called. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 2:34, and again at 2:40. By 3 p.m. I finally picked up calm, even-toned, just like Helen had advised. "Wow," he said, breathless and dramatic. "So we're just doing this now? Like this? No conversation? No warning? No warning?" I repeated. "Joel, you changed the locks on me without saying a word. It wasn't personal. I just thought it was time we, evolved the brand. Bring in new energy. You've been tired. I almost laughed. I wasn't tired when I rolled out those doughs at 4:30 a.m. I wasn't tired when I trained Tasha on the register. She now used to smile at customers like they were hers. But sure, let's call me tired. Joel, I said, I'm not fighting with you. I'm simply protecting what I built. The building is mine. The bakery's name? I filed that trademark 2 years ago. And unless you and your partner want to pay back rent and negotiate a new lease, you have 5 days to leave. He paused. I could hear his shallow breathing. Then came the shift. that slick tone he always used when he thought he was being clever. "You know, you're not being very reasonable. I mean, you still own the building, right? So what's the big deal? Why don't you let us keep running things, and you just collect a check?" I closed my eyes, counted to 3. Let the silence thicken. "You want me," I said slowly, "to let you run my business out of my building with your girlfriend while I fade into the background and collect scraps?" "Well, I wouldn't put it like that. But that's what it is, Joel. And let me be very clear. I didn't spend 10 years building something beautiful just to hand it over to someone who couldn't even remember to reorder parchment paper." Click. I ended the call. No yelling, no threats, just business. He wanted me tired, forgotten, erased. But what he was about to learn, this wasn't me tired. This was me just getting started. Saturday morning came, and with it, my usual routine coffee in my favorite chipped mug, the one with the faded strawberry on it, and a walk to the farmer's market 2 blocks down. I passed the bakery. I didn't slow down. But I saw the sign. Tasha Joel's Sweet Life, painted in a cursive font that looked like it was pulled from an app, still wet at the edges. The window decal had been slapped over the original Sweet June logo. You could still see the faint outline of the old name underneath if the sun hit just right. Tammy texted me a photo not long after. "Your name's still on the health permit in the window. Thought you'd want to know." Of course it was. Joel never bothered with paperwork. He left all of that to me. While they were busy rebranding and pretending I never existed, I was gathering everything they'd forgotten. The city business license still under Sweet June LLC, the commercial health permit filed in my name, and the fire inspection renewal past due because I'd always been the one to schedule it. By Monday, I'd sent Joel a second letter. Failure to comply with city business regulations under the new operating name constitutes a breach of local code. Additionally, use of Sweet June Bakery LLC's infrastructure, equipment, and recipes without authorization is under review for civil action. Helen's words, not mine. But delicious, weren't they? Tuesday morning, Tammy called me, not texted, called, breathless with gossip. "You're gonna want to come down here." So I did. Quietly. No dramatic entrance. I parked 2 streets over, wore sunglasses and a ball cap, like I was someone in a movie hiding from paparazzi. But I wasn't hiding. I was observing. A line had formed outside the bakery, but not the usual line of customers. The health inspector, the fire marshal, a city licensing official, and Joel. Outside, pacing. Tasha was at the front window, furiously scrubbing at the decal like it was a stain that wouldn't come out. I watched as she turned to Joel, flailing her arms, her lips moving fast and sharp. His face was red. His hands were on his hips. Then, as if on cue, a tray of muffins came flying out the back door, landing with a sad little splat on the sidewalk. The inspector shook her head, wrote something down, walked away. I didn't smile. Not outwardly. I just turned around, walked back to my car, and let out a long, satisfied exhale. You can't run a bakery on charm and hashtags. Not without inspections. Not without permits. And certainly not when the woman you tried to erase still owns the land under your feet. That afternoon, Joel called again. I didn't answer, but he left a voicemail. "You're being petty. This is bad for business you're building too, remember? We're all suffering here. We?" There it was. The desperation, wrapped in false unity. I forwarded the voicemail to Helen. Then I baked a small batch of honey walnut scones. I hadn't made them since the early days, back when we were still handwriting labels and taking cash out of a repurposed cigar box, back when it really was ours. And I thought, as I sprinkled a little raw sugar on top, maybe it's time to take it back. Not just the building. The whole thing. I spent Wednesday morning sorting through old files, recipe binders, vendor lists, payroll stubs, spreadsheets Joel never once opened but claimed to review. And tucked in the back of a drawer in my little loft kitchen, I found the original Sweet June menu, handwritten, creased at the corners, ink smudged from too many coffee rings. I ran my fingers across the page. Lavender lemon loaf, cinnamon pull-aparts, and at the top in big hopeful letters, a place where people feel hugged when they walk in. That had always been my dream, not just to feed people, to make them feel warm, welcomed, seen. Joel liked the idea of owning a business. I liked the reality of building one, of greeting the regulars, knowing that Mrs. Finch liked her coffee scalding hot, and that Marcus from the bookstore only ever ordered blueberry muffins if they were warm enough to melt the butter. So no, I hadn't planned to rebuild. But now I wasn't just defending what was mine. I was reclaiming what mattered. I called Helen. "I want to reopen," I said. "My way." There was a pause, then her smile cracked through the phone. "Do I get naming rights to a cookie?" "Only if you make me your famous bourbon balls again." "Done." We filed a formal notice to dissolve the old LLC and relaunch under a new one, Sweet June Co., sole proprietor, me. Trademark refiled, approved, city permits transferred, health inspection scheduled. I wasn't just closing a door on Joel and Tasha, I was opening a new one. That night, I walked past the bakery. The lights were dim. The windows were smudged. A sad, "Back soon" sign hung crookedly in the front. A man stood outside, staring at the closed sign. I recognized him, Eric, one of our oldest customers. He used to bring his daughter every Saturday morning after soccer practice. She'd always ask for extra whipped cream on her cocoa. "Closed again?" he said when he saw me. "Temporarily?" I said carefully. He looked down at the little girl beside him. "We miss your orange rolls." My heart tugged. "Give me a little time," I said softly. "They'll be back." He smiled. "We'll be waiting." By Friday, Helen had served Joel and Tasha their final notice. All operations must cease, and they had 48 hours to vacate the building or face formal eviction. They didn't call this time. But the next morning, when I arrived at the bakery with a clipboard and a contractor, Joel was standing out front. He looked smaller somehow. Not thinner, just deflated. Like a balloon that had been floating too high on borrowed helium. "Marlene," he said, voice low, "can we talk?" I looked down at the clipboard, then back at him. "We are talking." "Okay. Look." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Maybe things got out of hand. We made some mistakes." I said nothing, just watched him squirm. "You don't have to do this," he added. "We could work something out. Maybe come back. Share the space." I stared at him for a long moment, and then I said the only thing that mattered. "I'm not here to share. I'm here to start over. Without you." He opened his mouth, but I was already inside, measuring for new countertops. Saturday afternoon, I stood inside the bakery for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. It was strange how familiar it felt, even after everything. The scent of yeast still clung to the walls. My grandmother's copper bundt pan still hung near the prep station, right where I'd left it. Somehow, they hadn't touched it. Maybe even Tasha had known better than to mess with that. But the rest? It needed work. The floor was scuffed. The counters were sticky. The paint, once cheerful robin's egg blue, had dulled to something lifeless. It wasn't mine anymore. Not yet. So I did the only thing that made sense. I pulled my hair into a messy bun, turned on an old playlist from my early baking days, and started scrubbing. I scraped sticker residue off the windows. I peeled Tasha's vinyl Sweet Life logo off the glass, letter by stubborn letter, like reclaiming my space inch by inch. I boxed up their leftover inventory, half-melted macarons and dry influencer cupcakes, and labeled it for donation. And when the sun dipped low and golden through the front windows, I stood in the quiet and stared at the empty space like a blank page. That's when the knock came. It was Marcus from the bookstore, holding a mug of coffee. "I heard the takeover fell apart," he said, offering me the mug. "Tammy said you're coming back." I took the coffee gratefully. "Working on it." He looked around, eyes soft. "You know, people didn't stop coming because the pastries changed. They stopped because you weren't here." That one hit me right in the heart. After he left, I pulled out a paint roller and a can of fresh white primer. Step 1. Erase what doesn't belong. I painted until my arms ached, until every surface was clean again. Then I hung a new sign on the door, just temporary, handwritten on thick cardstock and framed with twine. Sweet June Co., reopening soon. Same soul, new fire. Sunday brought help. Not the kind I asked for, the kind that just shows up. Tammy brought her teenage niece to scrub the baseboards. Marcus dropped off a batch of bookmarks with soft launch coming soon. scrawled on them. Even Eric's daughter popped in with a box of paper hearts that said, "Missed you." It wasn't a grand gesture. No sweeping camera pans or movie magic montages. But it was something better. Community. One person at a time, willing to sweep a floor, hang a shelf, paint a wall. Joel never understood that part. He thought the bakery was about cupcakes and branding, but it was always about people, about place, about walking in and feeling known. By the end of the day, I had a team, unpaid, unofficial, unstoppable. And as I wiped flour-dusted handprints off the wall, I realized something. This place was never just mine. It was ours. And together, we were bringing it back. It was Monday when Joel showed up again. No warning, no call, just the jingle of the front door and the sound of his cheap loafers on my freshly mopped floors. I was in the back pantry, reorganizing dry goods, when I heard the voice. "Marlene?" I stepped out, wiping my hands on a towel. He stood there in the center of my bakery like he still had a claim to it, holding a manila folder, like it meant something. "Can I help you?" I asked, cool as ice. He smiled, the kind of smile that used to charm me back when I was young enough to mistake cockiness for confidence. Not anymore. "I figured we should have a civil conversation," he said, holding up the folder like it was a peace offering. "No lawyers, just us." I raised a brow. "That sounds convenient. For you." He set the folder down on the nearest table. "I've been doing some research, about partnership laws, business contributions, community property, that kind of thing." "Congratulations," I said. "Google can be a powerful tool." His smile faltered. He opened the folder to reveal some half-printed contracts, old bank statements, and a few receipts, most of which were printed on thermal paper, and had half faded away. "I contributed to this place," he said, voice tightening. "You can't just push me out like I was some stranger. I put in sweat equity." "You mean you showed up and stood behind the counter while I built the brand, paid the bills, and filed the taxes?" His face darkened. "You're acting like I didn't matter." I tilted my head. "No, Joel, I'm acting like the law matters." I reached beneath the counter and pulled out my own folder. Thicker, neater, labeled, dated. Here's the original deed. In my name. The business license. Registered to me. The prenuptial agreement, you signed it in front of a notary, remember? He didn't answer. I stepped closer. "And here," I said, tapping the final page, "is a full list of your expenses paid from the joint account, including the 32 charges you made at that catering supply store last fall without a single consultation. Half of those ingredients went to Tasha's pop-up idea, the one that failed." He didn't look up. "I also have surveillance footage," I added, "from the alley camera. The one you insisted we didn't need? Turns out, it caught more than you think." He ran a hand down his face, suddenly looking every bit of his 48 years. "This isn't how I wanted this to go," he muttered. "You mean you didn't expect me to fight back?" His eyes met mine. "You were never this cold." I let out a short laugh. "No, Joel. I was never this clear." He hesitated, glancing at the door like he was deciding whether to retreat or escalate. Then he said, quietly, "So what now? You really gonna erase me from everything?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked over to the window, peeled the last remnants of the Tasha Joel's Sweet Life decal off the glass, and dropped it in the trash. Then I turned to him. "You erase yourself, Joel. I'm just cleaning up." I announced the reopening on a Wednesday. No fanfare, no flashy graphics. Just a photo of my flour-dusted hands shaping dough, posted on Sweet Junko's new Instagram page with a single caption, "Back where I belong. Opening Sunday. Hope to see you there." Within 20 minutes, I had over 300 likes and 36 messages from regulars I hadn't seen in nearly a year. Mrs. Finch commented, "I'm setting my alarm. I want first pick of the pecan rolls." Marcus messaged, "Do I need to bring a folding chair? Or will there be a line?" But the one that meant the most came from Eric's daughter, Olivia. A picture of her holding one of the paper hearts she'd made for me, captioned, "Sweet June's is home again." I cried. Just a little. Then I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. Sunday morning, 6:04 a.m. I stood in the center of my bakery, wearing the same yellow apron I'd worn the day Joel changed the locks. Only this time, The keys were in my pocket. The glass cases gleamed. The ovens purred. Fresh scones cooled on the counter, golden and perfect. I'd kept the layout mostly the same intentionally. I wanted people to walk in and feel like no time had passed. Like their favorite chair, their favorite scent, their favorite moment was still right there waiting. By 6:45, the first customers were lining up. By 7:15, the line wrapped around the block. And at 8 o'clock on the dot, I opened the doors and said the words I'd been holding in my chest for weeks. Welcome back. The day passed in a blur of hugs, laughter, flour, and espresso shots. People brought flowers, drawings from their kids, letters. Some stayed and lingered, sipping slowly just to absorb the space again. Others left and came back hours later with friends, saying, "You have to try the almond tarts." But it wasn't just the food that brought them back. It was what the space meant. It meant something to me too. This wasn't about proving Joel wrong anymore. It wasn't even about reclaiming what he'd tried to take. It was about remembering what I loved and choosing to love it again. On my own terms. Later that evening, when the last customer left and I finally sat down at one of the corner tables with a steaming cup of chamomile, I saw them, Joel and Tasha, outside the bakery, across the street. He looked smaller than I remembered, worn, his shoulders hunched. Tasha stood beside him, arms crossed, visibly annoyed. She said something sharp. He flinched. I didn't move, just lifted my mug and took a long, steady sip. He met my eyes across the glass, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger, or triumph, or even pity. I felt nothing, and nothing, I realized, felt absolutely glorious. Everything was going great, until Thursday afternoon, when my phone buzzed in the apron pocket. Private number. Normally I let those go, straight to voicemail. But something told me to answer. I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped out to the back alley, where the air was cool and still smelled faintly of yeast and distant rain. Hello? A pause. Then Marlene. It's Charlotte. I froze. Charlotte. Joel's younger sister. The one who used to slide snide little comments across the dinner table, like dessert mints. The one who once gifted me a book called The Feminine Art of Knowing Your Place as a joke, she claimed. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. Not since the holiday brunch where she told me I was so brave for still wearing horizontal stripes. Now, she sounded different. Look, she said quickly, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say this. I waited. I was awful to you. I know that. I let my brother's narrative paint you out to be cold and controlling. And I believed it, because it was easier. But after everything that's happened, She trailed off. Her voice cracked. Joel's not doing well, she added. Tesha left. The business connections dried up. He's back living with Mom. And I think he's finally realizing what he did. I leaned against the brick wall, letting her words settle. He keeps saying, she continued. Marlene had a plan. Marlene always knew how things worked. He keeps asking how you pulled it off, and all I can think is, of course she did. She was holding everything together the whole time. I didn't speak. Not yet. I'm sorry, she said again, quieter this time. I should have stood up for you. It hit me then, not just the apology, but the weight of how much I'd held inside for years. All the little indignities, the backhanded compliments, the isolation masked as family bonding. And now, here she was, cracked open. I appreciate the call, Charlotte, I said finally. Truly. She let out a shaky laugh. You know, you were always too good for him. That, I said with a soft smile, I finally believe. Later that night, I sat at the counter with a pen and my planning notebook, one I hadn't touched since before the locks changed when the bell over the door jingled. And there he was, Joel, standing in the same spot he had the first time he walked into this bakery with a ring in his pocket and big talk about building a dream together. But this time, his coat was wrinkled, his face tired, and he wasn't holding a folder or a demand, just a small box in his hands. I won't stay long, he said softly. I folded the lease back into the envelope and placed it behind the counter. Didn't expect to see you. He nodded. I didn't expect to come. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he set the box down on the nearest table and pushed it gently toward me. These are yours. Well, they were always yours. I didn't want to admit it. I opened it. Inside, my grandmother's bundt pan, a stack of old recipe cards, a photo of me, Joel, and the first dollar we ever made here framed in cracked glass. I felt something shift in my chest. Not pain, not relief, just an old ache letting go. I kept thinking I could fix it all, he said, staring at the floor. Pretend it didn't happen. That maybe you'd come back and things would go back to how they were. He looked up. But the truth is, Marlene, you held everything together. The business, the bills, the us. I just stood there, smiling like I had a clue. I said nothing. There was nothing I needed to say. I don't deserve forgiveness, he added. But I wanted to tell you I'm sorry. For the locks. For Tasha. For letting your name get erased from something you created. He motioned to the window. I saw the new sign. It's perfect. I folded my arms, still quiet. You're not mad? He asked. I was, I said. But anger's a heavy thing to carry every day. I'd rather make bread. He let out a breath somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. I should go, he said, stepping back toward the door. I stopped him with a word. Joel? He turned. I hope you find something to build, I said. Not take over. Build. From the ground up. It's different. And it matters. He nodded. I'll try. And then he left. No drama, no begging, no theatrics. Just a man who finally understood what he'd lost, and a woman who no longer needed him to.